One introduction ROSEP view the United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only. For home building and furniture building, for just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry, and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable, wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree, but it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lungs, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom, the Eco-Design Wood Stove, and International Convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. ROSEP view purple air PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.
Hi, my name is Lily. Andrew gave you the intro to Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates and their concern for air pollution from indoor residential wood burning. Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, or ROSEP, would like every near neighbor of an indoor residential wood burner whose wood smoke enters their yards and sickens the near neighbors to have a purple air PM 2.5 monitor hanging from the eaves of their home to measure the level of PM 2.5 entering their yards. That measurement of air pollution should be used as evidence of unnecessary air pollution, and each indoor residential wood burner should be shut down based on that evidence, one indoor residential wood burner at a time if necessary. The presentation by Andrew ended at 2 minutes 5 seconds. The same presentation by Emma starts at 2 minutes 3 seconds before the end of this podcast. So I am Lily, your timekeeper, and you can start the next podcast at 2 minutes 5 seconds in if you would not like to see the presentation by Andrew a second time. This presentation by me, Lily, ends at 5 minutes in. What you will see in the main content of this ROSEP podcast will be news about air pollution from indoor residential wood burning and how that air pollution is being combated by ordinary people just like you who are unfortunately near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners at this time. There will also be news about unnecessary and highly polluting use of wood as fuel in industrial wood burners and preventable air pollution from wood burning wildfires. There will also be news about air pollution from PM 2.5 from gas-powered cars. There will also be news about airborne diseases which are also preventable with vaccines such as COVID-19 and measles and whooping cough, to name just a few. In 2025, Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates is also concerned with combating the Trump destruction of government funding for programs which protect human health through the Department of Health and Human Services, and Trump destruction of programs which fund the science and medical research plan to protect human health from preventable illnesses. Protecting human health is a patriotic act, and our defense against enemies is weakened if we are not as healthy as we can be. Heat pump rebates are now offered by the federal government, distributed through the eligible United States, are available in 2025 and are the best, cleanest, and now cheapest alternative to indoor residential wood burning if that burning is actually done to purportedly save money. Wind and solar as sources of the electricity that powers heat pumps and electric cars is also cheaper than burning wood. The adverse health effects that are caused by indoor residential wood burning also come at a cost to near neighbors, both in shortening and ending their lives and in actual hospital, clinic, and funeral costs. Instead of being compensated monetarily, near neighbors should instead be able to achieve immediate relief by stopping indoor residential wood burning in their hyper-localized neighborhoods, which relief readings from purple air PM 2.5 monitors used as evidence of air pollution will help them achieve. Welcome to news about hopeful scientific and medical achievements that will also help us achieve the goal of clean air to breathe.
Webisode 57DHYAFH December 18, 2025. This is what presidential panic looks like. In Webisode 57DHYAFH 1, this is what presidential panic looks like. 2, what Trump said in his primetime speech. 3, Trump announces federal pardon of Tina Peters, but that pardon does not apply to her state of Colorado conviction. 4, fact checking the Trump primetime address on the economy. The president cited misleading statistics to insist wrongly that prices were coming down. 5, what is going on with the health of Donald Trump? 6, Trump social and fusion energy business partnership. 7, Arizona Phoenix. He tried to protect his son from bullies. He did not know how far they would go. 8, Canada population shrinks amid tightened immigration. 9, China flying taxis. China has them and drone lunch deliveries. 2, China experiments in clean energy can feel like living in the future even when things do not quite work. 10, Taiwan birth rates are falling, but do not blame dogs and strollers. 11, 12, and 13, headlines main content. 1, Washington, D.C. This is what presidential panic looks like. Donald Trump delivered a fear-drenched rant live from the White House. Donald Trump delivers a live address from the White House. Rozep top excerpt. He hurled one lie after another into the camera. We could take apart the Trump fake facts as checkers and pundits will do in the next few days. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against would smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization, The Atlantic, December 17, 2025. The President of the United States just barged into American living rooms like an angry, confused grandfather to tell us all that we are ungrateful whelps. When a president asks for network time, it is usually to announce something important. But tonight, Donald Trump did not give anything like a normal speech or address. He was clearly working from a prepared text, but it sounded like one he had written or dictated. Angrily himself because it was full of bizarre howlers that even the Trump second-rate speechwriting shop would probably have avoided, such as his assertion that inflation when he took office was the worst it had been in 48 years. Why did he pick 1977 as a benchmark? Who knows, but he is wrong. He read the speech quickly, his voice rising in frustration as he hurled one lie after another into the camera. We could take apart the Trump fake facts as checkers and pundits will do in the next few days, but perhaps more important than false statements, which for Trump are par for the course, was his demeanor. Americans saw a president drenched in panic as he tried to bully an entire nation into admitting he was doing a great job for 20 minutes. He vented his hurt feelings without a molecule of empathy or awareness. Economic concerns. Shut up, you fools. The economy is doing fine, and if it is not his fault. It is Biden foreign policy jitters. Zip it, you wimps. America is strong and respected. 2, Washington, D.C. What Trump said in his primetime speech. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against would smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. PBS News, December 17, 2025. President Donald Trump address to the nation was a primetime attempt to seize control of the narratives that suggest he has lost the trust of voters on the economy. Addressing this anxiety and more, Trump was blunt from the start of his speech about who to blame for the woes of America. 11 months ago, I inherited a mess, and I am fixing it, he said, placing the blame squarely on his predecessor, President Biden, and Democratic policies on border security, inflation, and healthcare that he claimed his administration has been working to correct this year. But the American fortunes will change, Trump said. He touted a number of data points and metrics on falling prices and improved job numbers, among other topics, though it is not clear what sources he and the White House were referencing. Trump also previewed some policy items on his to-do list in 2026, such as bonus checks for U.S. troops and a way to drive down drug prices. As 2025 draws to a close, Trump is underwater. While he gave himself an A with 5 pluses on handling the economy, Americans graded him with new record low marks in the latest PBS News NPR Marist poll. Affordability is top of the minds of voters as more signs emerge of a cooling labor market and tariffs raise prices. Trump gets worst economic ratings ever in new poll as Americans worry about affordability. 3, Washington, D.C. Trump announces federal pardon of Tina Peters, but that pardon does not apply to her state of Colorado conviction. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against would smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. Heather Cox Richardson, December 18, 2025. Trump has repeatedly attacked Colorado Governor Polis, a Democrat, since his refusal to pardon former Colorado election official Tina Peters, convicted by a jury for state crimes and facilitating a data breach in her quest to overturn the 2020 presidential election. Peters is serving a 9-year prison sentence. On December 11, Trump granted Peters a full pardon, but since presidents cannot issue pardons for state crimes, that means little unless Polis also pardons her. Democracy docket reported on escalating calls for violence to free Peters coming from prominent right-wing figures. Talking points memo posted after the threat to close NCR that he was hearing this as payback for Colorado not honoring Trump. Peters pardon. Former special counsel Jack Smith testified today behind closed doors before the House Judiciary Committee about his investigation into the Trump attempt to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election. Chair Jim Jordan, ROH, subpoenaed Smith earlier this month, rejecting the Smith offer to testify in public. Jordan was among those claiming to be outraged at the news that Smith had obtained the call records of 9 congressional Republicans related to the Trump attempt to overturn the results of the election after Smith testified. Ranking member of the Judiciary Committee Jamie Raskin, Democrat of Maryland, said Jordan made an excellent decision in not allowing Jack Smith to testify publicly, because had he done so, it would have been absolutely devastating to the president and all the Trump men involved in the insurrectionary activities of January 6th. 4, fact checking the Trump primetime address on the economy. The president cited misleading statistics to insist wrongly that prices were coming down. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against would smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, December 17, 2025. Trump praised what he portrayed as the economic gains under his administration in an address from the White House on Wednesday, even as consumers expressed concerns about affordability and voiced discontent over how he has handled the economy. I am bringing those high prices down and bringing them down very fast. Let us look at the facts, Trump said before ticking off a litany of misleading claims. Here is a look at those facts. What was said when I took office: inflation was the worst in 48 years, and some would say in the history of our country. False. Inflation had already fallen to 3% in January when Trump Took office. Inflation did reach a four-decade high in the summer of 2022 at about 9.1% that June, but had declined since then. That number was also not a record. Inflation reached higher points in the 1910s, 1970s, and 1980s. What was said the price of a Thanksgiving turkey was down 33% compared to the Biden last year. The price of eggs is down 82% since March. And everything else is falling rapidly, and it is not done yet. This is exaggerated. Trump may have been referring to and overstating a report from the American Farm Bureau, which estimated that the cost of a turkey at the grocery store before Thanksgiving had declined by 16% this year from last year, but wholesale turkey prices had actually risen this year according to data from the Agriculture Department and a Purdue University report. This is likely because turkeys are known as loss leaders, or items that retailers may sell at a loss to entice consumers to the store on eggs. Trump is correct that the wholesale price of eggs had fallen from more than $8 a dozen in late February to $1.45 last week, a decline of more than 80%. The retail price of eggs declined less sharply, about 44% from March to September. The month with the most recent data available. Trump was also wrong that everything else is falling rapidly. In fact, the consumer price index rose by 3% in September. What was said? Gasoline is now under $2.50 a gallon into much of the country. In some states it, by the way, just hit $1.99 a gallon. This is exaggerated. Nationally, gas prices averaged $2.90 per gallon in the week ending December 15th, according to the Energy Information Administration, a government statistical agency. Estimates from non-government trackers like GasBuddy and AAA were similar. It is possible that specific gas stations have prices as low as Trump heralded, but according to AAA, just 4 states had average gas prices below $2.50 Wednesday, with Oklahoma reporting the lowest average price at $2.34 a gallon. There were no states with average gas prices below $2. What was said already? I have secured a record-breaking $18 trillion of investment into the United States. False. The Trump $18 trillion is almost double what his own White House press office has tallied, $9.6 trillion. It also includes broad pledges and previously announced projects, and more than half of that amount comes from informal pledges from foreign countries to invest in the United States that experts warn may be unrealistic. For example, Qatar and the United Arab Emirates each pledged more than $1 trillion in investments, which is more than their gross domestic products. Previous pledges in the Trump first term may also show the amorphous nature of such promises. A 2017 pledge from Saudi Arabia to buy $450 billion of American products did not fully materialize. What was said? We wrapped 12 different bills up into one beautiful bill that includes no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and no tax on Social Security for our great seniors. This is exaggerated. The Trump signature domestic policy law, which he signed over the summer, creates deductions for tips and overtime, but those breaks are temporary, and its tax reductions for Social Security benefits are even more limited. The law allows workers to deduct tips and overtime pay from the 2025 to 2028 tax years. The deductions are capped at $25,000 and $12,500 and decrease for individuals making more than $150,000 a year. It also creates a deduction of $6,000 or seniors phasing out for higher incomes and expiring in 2028 that is not quite eliminating all taxation on benefits. An analysis from the Council of Economic Advisors, an executive branch agency, estimated that under the $6,000 deduction, 88% of Social Security beneficiaries over 65 would pay no taxes on their benefits. That is an increase from the 64% who previously paid no taxes, according to the same report, but still omits 12% or more than 7 million seniors over 65. Additionally, Social Security beneficiaries under 65, millions of disabled people, young survivors, and early retirees do not qualify for the deduction. 5. Washington, D.C. Trump health. What is going on with the health of Donald Trump? The Trump appearance and schedule have sparked speculation, perhaps fueled in part by his political fortunes. Excerpts edited by Rozeb for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization, The Guardian, December 18, 2025. Is Trump okay? Recently, he has looked tired. His famous fake tan is a bit more sallow than usual and seems painted on more thickly and clumsily than it was before. He appears to nod off in front of cameras more and more often, including in cabinet meetings and press events in the Oval Office. His public schedule is light. He is often at his golf clubs, has traveled around the country less frequently than at this point in his first term, and now only rarely holds the stadium rallies that once defined his preferred style of politics. He tends to sit even when others are standing and has shortened his daily schedule, often not conducting official duties before noon. His public appearances have declined by nearly 40% compared to his first year in office. He sometimes disappears from public view for days. His right hand seems to be experiencing frequent injury or discoloration. It will often be covered with a band-aid or smeared with makeup. The White House has claimed implausibly that he is bruised from shaking too many hands. His ankles are visibly swollen. Trump, at 79, is the oldest man to ever be elected to the presidency, and he ascended to the office after making his own harsh criticisms of Joe Biden, whose age became the subject of scandal after stiff stumbling and incoherent public appearances provoked speculation that his staff were concealing the extent of his decline in 2020. For Trump made the Biden age and infirmity into a symbol of the inadequacy of the Democratic Party and the unwillingness of Washington elites to combat the American backward slide. When he took office early in 2025, he placed a picture of an autopin in the place where the Biden official portrait would have been on the Presidential Walk of Fame. That Trump installed the notion was that Biden, too old to hold the office, was out to lunch running the administration on autopilot. It would be irresponsible to attempt to diagnose him here, but Trump is mortal and he is old. His reign is going to end. If Trump seems weak physically, then it might in part be because he is at his weakest politically. The changing winds of public opinion have now seemed to quiet the Trump ambitions to seek an unconstitutional third term. Republicans are less willing to stick their necks out to help Trump attempt something so obviously illegal when his own ability to pull it off seems so slim. Trump is a lame duck. U.S. democracy is not safe. The Trump increasingly obvious mortality is beginning to change the calculations of everyone. Even it seems his own Trump seems increasingly ponderous and reflective in his old age, and lately, he has been talking about death more often. I think I am not maybe heaven bound, he said in October. I am not sure if I am going to be able to make heaven. 6. Washington, D.C. Trump Social and Fusion Energy Business Partnership Truth Social parent to merge with nuclear fusion firm in $6 billion deal. Trump Media and Technology Group, the social media and crypto company part owned by President Trump, said it would help develop a utility-scale fusion power plant. Trump Media and Technology Group is the parent company of Truth Social, a social media platform that has struggled to gain widespread traction. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization, The New York Times, December 18, 2025. The Trump social media company, which recently expanded into streaming and cryptocurrency, is now looking to become a fusion power company. Trump Media and Technology Group and TE Technologies, a fusion power company, said Thursday they had agreed to an all-stock merger valued at more than $6 billion. The deal would be a total transformation for Trump Media, the parent company of Truth Social, a social media platform that has struggled to gain market share beyond serving as the main online megaphone for President Trump. The loss-making company generated about $2.7 million in revenue in the first 9 months of the year, mostly via advertising. Its once high-flying stock has been flagging, falling about 69% this year before the merger announcement. The announcement provided a jolt to Trump Media shares, which opened more than 20% higher on Thursday. President Trump is the largest shareholder in the company, owning a large stake worth more than $1 billion, though it was once worth more than $4 billion. His shares are held in a trust managed by his eldest son, Donald Jr., who is a Trump Media board member. Donald Trump did not immediately comment on the deal on Truth Social. The merger would create one of the first publicly traded nuclear fusion companies in the world, according to a news release. Some tech companies are looking at fusion, a still experimental technology, as a clean energy source that could help feed the electricity thirst of AI data centers. The deal is likely to draw scrutiny, as it would indirectly put Donald Trump in competition with other companies looking to fuel and profit from the AI revolution. Companies tied to AI have fueled a surge in the stock market this year, but also have raised concern about the technology eliminating jobs in scores of industries. The merged companies plan to create the first utility-scale fusion power plant in 2026 and aim to build additional plants in the future, according to a news release. Fusion power will be the most dramatic energy breakthrough since the onset of commercial nuclear energy in the 1950s. Devin Nunes, the chief executive of Trump Media, said in the announcement it is unclear if the merger would need any additional regulatory approval beyond basic clearance by the Securities and Exchange Commission. Producing energy through nuclear fusion, the process that powers stars, is a long, elusive dream among scientists. Fusion uses fuels that are abundant, eliminates the risk of meltdowns, and produces no long-term radioactive waste. It could produce power that is free of carbon emissions and available around the clock. Government laboratories have achieved several tantalizing demonstrations the potential of fusion in recent years, but the process is enormously complicated to initiate and control, and developing machines that can do it consistently and affordably enough to power a grid could require technological advancements that have yet to be made, and perhaps even materials that have yet to be invented. Even so, several fusion startups now say they are close to building commercial plants. Commonwealth Fusion Systems, a spin-off from research at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, is aiming to build and generate power from a plant in Chesterfield County, Virginia, in the early 2030s. Halion Energy, a startup backed by the OpenAI chief Sam Altman, has started building a fusion plant in Washington state that is expected to supply power to Microsoft data centers by 2028. The chief executive of TE said that advancements at the company had reached the point where we are ready to move to utility-scale fusion power. He said, adding that the plan was to have first power in 2031. China is investing heavily in fusion research as part of its efforts to power more of its economy with clean sources. Government and private investors poured $2.1 billion this year into a new state-owned fusion company in Shanghai, and government labs are building cutting-edge facilities for fusion experiments. The United States, by contrast, has focused its fusion efforts on supporting the growth of the private fusion industry rather than expanding federally funded research initiatives. TE, originally called Tri-Alpha Energy, was founded in 1998. TE has built 5 fusion reactors to date and had raised more than $1.3 billion over the years, mostly recently in a June funding round backed by Chevron and Google, among others. The British government recently announced a joint venture with TE on fusion technology. Trump Media came into existence in early 2021. Later that year, it announced a merger with a cash-rich public shell company known as a special purpose acquisition company. It then rolled out Truth Social, which has emerged as the Donald Trump main online platform for communicating with the world. But Truth Social has struggled to gain market share or advertising dollars. The company has recently diversified into cryptocurrency, raising $2.5 billion to invest in Bitcoin, and it is also working to bring crypto-related exchange-traded funds, or ETFs, to market if the merger is completed. Trump Media plans to provide up to $300 million to TE Technologies, and shareholders of both companies would each own approximately 50% of the combined company. The announcement said Devin Nunes and Donald Trump Jr. would remain on the combined 9-member board of both companies. 7. Arizona Phoenix. He tried to protect his son from bullies. He did not know how far they would go or moved his family to Gilbert, in part because of the low crime rate of the area after his son was repeatedly attacked, or reached out to his suburban school, to the police, and to other parents. The violence only got worse. Photo of T with his father are in Gilbert, Arizona. Rozep viewed the word bully should be the word of the year of 2025, as those who retired it on adulthood had to revamp it to fit Trump 2.0. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization, The New York Times, December 16, 2025. Nearly 5 years ago, in November 2020, Arcooner opened the door of his Arizona apartment to find a uniformed cop standing outside. Next to him was his son T, aged 14. T was arrested for trying to break into a parked car. The other boy was a high school student already well known to the police. The schools were good, the median income was high, and crime rates were low. All reasons he had chosen to move to Gilbert in the first place. In addition to the pressures of classwork and competitive swimming, Ar knew that his son was still processing his divorce from the mother of T and the decision of his mother to move to the west side of Phoenix. So instead of issuing punishment as his own parents might have done, he secured A promise from Tristan that he would stay away from his friend TR was never charged with a crime, and our resolve to put the incident behind them. This turned out to be easier said than done in the coming days. T and his friend became embroiled in a heated exchange. T, the friend believed, had snitched on him to the police. In fact, it had been her who pointed a finger at the other boy. I gave them a statement saying basically that T had been pressured into it, or said I thought the cops should know that I was being a good dad, you know. I was trying to protect my son. Our believes that trusting that at school T would be kept safe was probably a mistake. The former friend challenged Tristan to a 60-second fistfight at a bus stop. T made a counterproposal of 15 seconds. They settled on 25. Tristan took several punches before being shoved into a bush, bruised and bleeding from scratches on his arms. He managed to reach his phone and call his father. I got there and Tristan is splayed out on his back, or recalled he could not move his body. I had to carry him to the passenger seat of my car. It was clear that this was escalating in a frightening way. He drove T back to their apartment where the boy was interviewed by the Gilbert police. In a report, an officer wrote that he asked T why he did not just walk or run away rather than agree to fight. He replied that his friend was faster than him and he would have chased after him and assaulted him anyways. In a separate conversation, the officer interviewed the mother of the friend. The friend had been recently detained at a juvenile detention center in Phoenix for a different infraction. She was not sure when he would be out, but she was planning to enroll him in a military academy. Years later, there was another assault on T. Another lawsuits by parents of a boy named L, who was killed, which has since been settled, named 4 other participants in the assault on T, including F, who was arrested for his role in the later attack on Tristan and 2 of the teenagers awaiting trial in the murder of Lord. I still talk to the dad of L, or told the reporter in August 2025. I try to support him, he said, but it is hard because it is like, man, your son is gone. Mine is not. I cannot imagine that feeling, of course, in a different way, a very different way. My son is gone too. Here I am missing the crucial years of his life. When a kid needs his father, I feel like I have let him down. The sentencing of the participants in the in-and-out assault have helped. He allowed. Still, I will be honest, it does not feel like enough. Or told me he and his attorneys filed a lawsuit against 17 former East Valley students and 26 of their parents or guardians who were described in the suit as liable for the campaign of their children of willful or malicious conduct. The filing is purposefully broad. It names the perpetrators in the attack on T, but also teenagers who have not been accused by law enforcement of directly attacking T. They are part of what the suit calls a conspiracy to commit assault and battery on innocent and unsuspecting teenagers separately, or has sued local school leadership and the Gilbert Police Department for $6 million for engaging in a pattern of gross negligence and for failing to protect T and others, but the lawsuits have not provided the closure he hoped for. While some of the defendants have chosen to settle several of the claims, including the one against the L family, have been dismissed. I truly believe that if parents had gotten a grip on what was going on through 2022 and 2023, if the schools had, if the police had, L would still be alive. Or told the reporter, if you had arrests, that would have been a deterrent. It would have sent a message. Instead, he continued, sort of the opposite thing happened. A kid died, and then everyone woke up to where the underlying issue was one of reactivity versus proactivity, a phrase I heard him use often. You had the city and the schools essentially sweeping this stuff under the rug, he said, hoping it would go away, hoping it was just kids being kids. It was understandable that or would want to frame it that way, a neat, clear-cut interpretation of a series of events that were anything but the story was considerably more tangled and convoluted in a manner that could be repeated in other jurisdictions with other kids. The circumstances that led to the brief epidemic of teen violence that ensnared T are not unique. Police with limited knowledge of how teens interact, parents unsure of what is going on, overworked school administrators struggling to get a grip on harassment that seeps between digital platforms and the schoolyard. The attacks on T were linked to a larger epidemic of bullying in the East Valley area of Phoenix. 8. Canada population shrinks amid tightened immigration. The government has greatly restricted the number of work and study permits issued to foreigners following an unpopular immigration boom during the pandemic. Excerpts edited by Rozap for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, December 17, 2025. The population of Canada has declined, driven by a drop in immigration. New census data shows as the federal government tries to limit the number of international students allowed into the country, the population of Canada now stands at just under 41.6 million people, decreasing by about 76,000 people, or 0.18% over the last quarter, according to demographic estimates published Wednesday by Statistics Canada, the census agency. That follows nearly a year of virtually zero population growth. Agency data shows the last time the Canada population decreased on a quarterly basis was at the end of 2020, when border restrictions in response to the COVID-19 pandemic were in place. The agency attributed the population decrease to a reduced number of arrivals of non-permanent residents. While the dip was small, it was the largest decline since 1946, as Canada, like much of Europe and Asia, struggles with falling birth rates and has become dependent on immigration for growth. The population dip is a stark reversal from immigration milestones hit in the later stages of the pandemic after border restrictions eased again, especially in 2023, when Canada grew by over 1 million people in a single year for the first time in its history. Because of newcomers, the caps on foreigners have started to strain colleges and universities, which rely on the higher tuition fees paid by international students, and some business owners who count on temporary worker programs for cheaper labor. The new data show that foreign student permits issued by the government decreased by almost 74,000 between July and September, primarily in Ontario and British Columbia, the 2 most populous English-speaking provinces. 9. China flying taxis. China has them, and drone lunch deliveries. 2. China experiments in clean energy can feel like living in the future, even when things do not quite work. Excerpts edited by Rozap for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, December 17, 2025. As an American reporter living in Beijing, I have watched both China and the rest of the world flirt with cutting-edge Technologies involving robots, drones, and vehicles that drive themselves, but China has now raced far beyond the flirtation stage. It is rolling out fleets of autonomous delivery trucks, experimenting with flying cars, and installing parking lot robots that can swap out your EV dying battery in just minutes. There are drones that deliver lunch by lowering it from the sky on a cable. If all that sounds futuristic and perhaps bizarre, it also shows the China ambition to dominate clean energy. Technologies of all kinds, not just solar panels or battery-powered cars, then sell them to the rest of the world. China has incurred huge debts to put trillions of dollars into efforts like these, along with the full force of its state-planned economy. These ideas, while ambitious, do not always work smoothly, as I learned after taking a bullet train to Hefei, a city the size of Chicago, to see what it is like to live in this vision of tomorrow. Hefei is one of many cities where technologies like these are getting prototyped in real time. I checked them all out: the battery-swapping robots, the delivery trucks that drive themselves, the lunches from the sky, starting with flying taxis, no pilot on board. Hefei is one of the first Chinese cities to issue permits for what are basically flying cars, so I booked a ride. Many Chinese cities have not only replaced diesel buses with electric ones, but are also experimenting with hydrogen-powered buses and driverless buses, and driverless garbage trucks and driverless vending machines. One such vending machine was operating in the Hefei Park, where we ordered our drone lunches. According to a nearby hot dog vendor, the brightly lit four-wheeler drove into the park every morning, though always accompanied by a person on a bike who made sure nothing went wrong. A robotic snack machine that needs a chaperone. How practical is that? But the fact that they are rolling around the streets of Hefei at all says something about the China willingness to test the boundaries of transportation technologies. Some ideas may not work out, and others might suit China, but not travel well. For example, Beijing can essentially order aero straight rail lines to be built almost to the heart of urban areas with little concern for what is in the way. Other countries cannot replicate that. Chinese-built bullet trains in Nigeria and Indonesia, which travel from the suburbs of one city to the next, have not proven nearly as popular. Still, China shows a willingness to take risks that other countries may not. In San Francisco, the death of a bodega cat killed by a taxi that drove itself has hurt the industry image, but in China, fleets of similar cars are operating widely, and sensors delete reports of accidents. The cars are improving their software and gaining experience. As for me, after several days putting the Hefei idea of the future to the test, it was time to head for my next reporting assignment in Nanjing by bullet train. Of course, other related headlines about China driverless vehicles inside the China drive to dominate clean energy. There is a race to power the future. China is pulling away. Beijing is selling clean energy to the world. Washington is pushing oil and gas. Both are driven by national security. June 30th, 2025, Chinese car giants rush into Brazil with dreams of dominating a continent as the likes of Ford and Mercedes retreat. Great Wall Motor and BYD are building factories and bringing affordable EVs and hybrids to one of the biggest markets in the world. July 21st, 2025, in the quest for clean energy, China went from copycat to creator. A surge in high-quality research and patent applications has cemented the China dominance in the industry. August 14th, 2025, why China built 162 square miles of solar panels on the highest plateau in the world. China is using the high-altitude expanse for immense solar panel farms and wind turbines, and has begun work on the largest hydroelectric dams in the world. October 10th, 2025, how China powers its electric cars and high-speed trains. China is building a network of ultra-high voltage power lines to carry solar and wind energy hundreds and even thousands of miles as few citizens dare to protest. October 11th, 2025, China is outpacing the U.S. on nuclear power, an American invention. The United States was once the undisputed leader in atomic energy. Now it is trying to catch up. October 22nd, 2025, the Ford car of the future hatched in a skunkworks near Los Angeles. Desperate to catch up with Chinese automakers, Ford is redesigning its fleet with a Silicon Valley-style team. Is it too late? December 11, 2025. 10 Taiwan birth rates are falling, but do not blame dogs and strollers. New research suggests that having a pet can actually make people more likely to become parents. A South Korean official said young couples were choosing pets over children, but it might not be that simple. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity. In relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, December 18, 2025. Are pets crowding out babies? As concern grows over the global fertility crisis, people who chose to have dogs or cats, but not children, have become a popular scapegoat in many cities. It is not uncommon to see pets dressed in fancy outfits pushed around in strollers. These pampered animals, the theory goes, have become replacements for human children, contributing to plummeting birth rates. In 2022, Pope Francis called people who choose pets over children selfish and warned that childlessness would contribute to a demographic winter. It is not hard to find evidence of the cultural shift. A festival in Japan that honors birthdays of children has undergone a pet-friendly revamp, allowing dogs to receive blessings, as well. At a celebration in Tokyo this year, a shrine honored 350 dogs, many of whom were dressed in elaborate kimonos, and just 50 children. But a new working paper suggests that the conventional wisdom is wrong, at least in Taiwan, where the birth rate is one of the lowest in the world. Researchers found that rather than replacing children, pets are actually more likely to be a stepping stone to having them. To figure out if people in Taiwan were actually replacing babies with stroller puppies, the researchers drew on government data on pet and birth registrations, tracking the timing and correlation of those life events for millions of households. The data showed that people with pets, particularly dogs, were actually more likely than those who were not pet owners to go on to have children. To the researchers, this strongly suggested that people who were considering having children wanted to try pet ownership first, perhaps as a lower risk way of figuring out if they were suited to parenthood. The takeaway here is not that we should be handing out puppies to boost the birth rate, nor is one working paper on one country evidence that the same pattern would play out elsewhere, but the study should give pause to those who are quick to blame falling birth rates on individual decisions. In reality, falling birth rates have multiple causes, many of them economic. The effective cost of having children has risen steeply as standards of living have increased. At the same time, intensive parenting norms mean that parents in most developed countries now spend roughly twice as much time on childcare as they did in the 1960s, and as the economic opportunities of women have improved, making it easier for them to support themselves, that has lessened the Pressure to marry and have children. 11 headlines. The New York Times, December 18, 2025. Arizona, Phoenix. He tried to protect his son from bullies. He did not know how far they would go. The New York Times, California. Housing affordability. Palo Alto confronts billionaires over their housing compounds. The New York Times, Canada. Population shrinks amid tightened immigration. The New York Times, China. Clean energy push is powering flying taxis, food delivery drones, and bullet trains. The New York Times, China. Opinion. Trump is helping China realize its dream of AI dominance. The New York Times, Consumers. Spelling bees, the hardest and easiest spelling bee words of 2025. The New York Times, Democrats. The DNC is killing its autopsy of what went wrong in 2024. The New York Times, Democrats and Republicans. Nearly $900 million flowed in secret to help Harris and Trump in 2024. The New York Times, film. New York City premiere. Timothée Chalamet, Gwyneth Paltrow, and Zohran Mamdani toast Marty Supreme. The New York Times, Georgia. Fani Willis calls Trump and allies criminals in hearing before Georgia Senate Committee. The New York Times. Georgia. Trump pressed Georgia Speaker to overturn the state election vote in 2020. Call. The New York Times, Ghana. Opinion. What happens when you send a girl to school? The New York Times, Healthcare. Congress House passes healthcare bill without subsidy extension. Italy. Prehistory. Nature. More than 2,000 dinosaur footprints are found in the Italian Alps. The New York Times, Louisiana. Travel. Exploring bayous and beaches on Amtrak new Gulf Coast train line. The New York Times, New York City. NYC City Council introduces bill to create the Mamdani Community Safety Agency. The New York Times, New York City Mayor in 2026. Mamdani names budget director as he prepares to enact costly agenda. The New York Times, New York City set to raise the cap on permits for street vendors. The New York Times, Politicians. How affordability became a new magic word for politicians. The New York Times, RFK Jr. Lack of knowledge of science and medicine. Opinion. GLP-1's 14 users discuss. The New York Times, Science. Trump budget cuts to fund tax breaks for the rich. She tracked fish that coastal communities depend on. Then she was fired from NOAA. The New York Times. Sweden Lovable, a startup that makes anyone a coder, raises $30 million. The New York Times, Taiwan birth rates are falling, but do not blame dogs and strollers. The New York Times, Texas sleep cots and graham crackers at the Elon Musk child care program. The New York Times, Trump affordability. Opinion. David Brooks, E.J. Dion, and Robert Siegel take stock of 2025. The New York Times. Trump Epstein fallout. The best friend of Don. How Epstein and Trump bonded over the pursuit of women. The New York Times, Trump FBI. Dan Bongino to step down as FBI deputy director. The New York Times, Trump Hegseth fallout. Venezuela. For Hegseth, there is one boat strike. He does not want the public to see. The New York Times, Trump idea. 6 takeaways from the Trump address to the nation. The New York Times. Trump idea. Fact-checking the Trump primetime address on the economy. The New York Times, Trump idea. Full transcript of President the Trump speech on the economy. The New York Times, Trump idea. Trump boasts about economy in primetime speech. The New York Times, Trump idea. Trump delivers attacks and deflects blame for American economic worries. The New York Times, Trump idea. Trump finds that retribution is not always so easy. The New York Times, Trump idea. Trump unveils presidential walk of fame with plaques that make jabs at Biden and Obama. The New York Times, Trump judiciary. Opinion. Threats to judges could lead to a judicial system crisis. The New York Times, Trump lack of affordability. CPI report live. Updates. Inflation unexpectedly slowed to 2.7% in November. The New York Times, Trump military idea. Trump announces $1,776 warrior dividend for military. The New York Times, Trump nuclear fusion partnership. Truth Social parent to merge with nuclear fusion firm in $6 billion deal. The New York Times, Trump resistance. Opinion. What courage does for us. The New York Times, TV late night shades the Trump impromptu liar side chat. The New York Times, Ukraine EU leaders debate plan for Ukraine financed by frozen Russian assets. The New York Times, Ukraine European leaders face off over whether to tap Russian frozen assets for Ukraine. The New York Times, Ukraine Russia, the Putin confidant who pushed back against the Russia war in Ukraine. The New York Times, United Kingdom affordability. Interest rate cut and slower inflation offer Britons a reprieve. The New York Times, universities is applying to college via early decision a good idea. Here is what your income has to do with it. The New York Times, Venezuela. The Trump claim that Venezuela stole U.S. oil fields sets off a nationalist reaction. The New York Times, 12 headlines. The Guardian, December 18, 2025. Brazilian president vows to veto bill cutting the Jair Bolsonaro prison term. Jair Bolsonaro. The Guardian, crops climate change. How climate breakdown is putting the food of the world in peril and maps and charts climate crisis. The Guardian, gift exchanges. This Christmas, let us ban the most miserable gift-giving game in the world. 4 Secret Santas. Dave Schilling. The Guardian, Michigan, uniquely evil. Michigan residents fight against huge data center backed by top tycoons. Michigan. The Guardian, RFK Jr. lack of knowledge of medicine and science. CDC officials urge U.S. flu vaccination after record child deaths last year. U.S. News. The Guardian, Trump ally interview. Susie Wiles interview might be a useful distraction from how poorly things are going for Americans. Trump administration. The Guardian, Trump Epstein fallout. Deadline nears for release of Epstein files. What we know so far. Jeffrey Epstein. The Guardian, Trump fusion business partnership. Media announces $6 billion merger plan with fusion power company. Media. The Guardian, Trump health. What is going on with the health of Donald Trump? Moira Donegan. The Guardian, Trump idea. Bah humbug. Address suggests he is feeling the chill of opinion polls. Donald Trump. The Guardian, Trump idea. Trump attacks Democratic foes in White House presidential portraits. Donald Trump. The Guardian, Ukraine Europe EU leaders urged to use frozen Russian assets to fund the Ukraine defense. European Union. The Guardian, Trump lack of affordability. U.S. lost 105,000 jobs in October and added 64,000 in November according to delayed data. U.S. economy. The Guardian, Trump lack of affordability. U.S. prices continue to rise despite Trump claims they are rapidly falling. U.S. economy. The Guardian, Trump tariffs. We wanted to take action. U.S. toy company fights back over Trump tariffs. Trump tariffs. The Guardian, Ukraine filmmaker Mstislav Chernov. I kept seeing Ukraine as a victim of this invasion. I wanted to tell another story. Movies. The Guardian. Universities. This student group agrees U.S. universities are too elitist, but aims to transform, not destroy them. U.S. universities. The Guardian. Venezuela. U.S. strike on alleged drug boat in Pacific kills 4 as Trump accuses Venezuela of taking our oil. U.S. News. The Guardian. 13 headlines. Other media. December 18, 2025. Ambulances for Ukraine finishing the job. December 18, 2025. Deliver automobiles with drone jamming equipment to the Second Corps of the Ukrainian National Guard known as Kartia. These drone jamming vehicles, refitted trucks, and vans are necessary for safe transport.
Red Green Fox here. The quick red green fox jumped over the barriers to clean air. Red Green Fox here. Ready to sing to you the names of the 2025 major wood-burning biomass industry subsidy opponents. 1. Biofuel Watch. 2. Bulkley Valley Stewardship Coalition of British Columbia, Canada. 3. Comite Schoen Luft, which means Beautiful Air Committee in German. 4. Dogwood Alliance. 5. Equity Group Foundation, nicknamed EGF. 6. Environmental Paper Network, nicknamed EPN. 7. Natural Resources Defense Council, nicknamed NRDC. 8. Prakaunia Narzexwisistik Istit, which means Workshop for All Beings in Polish. 9. Rachel Carson Council. 10. Solutions for Our Climate, nicknamed SFOC.
Cat's corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. Saying the quiet part out loud. Roar. Hi, I am Tiger. Our human asked us to get up from our naps and start Cat's Corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. She gave us a list of internet allies which we will post for her here.
Hi, I am Leone. It is better for your mental fitness to go to these websites than to go to bro sites for advice. Substack letters from an American Heather Cox Richardson. Substack your local epidemiologist. The Midas Touch. The Guardian. The New York Times.
One introduction. Rosette view. The United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only for home building and furniture building. For just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry, and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable, wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree. But it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen, and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lung, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom. The Eco-Design Wood Stove and International Convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. Rosette view. Purple air. PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.